Okay, in this tutorial what we're going to do is we're going to apply the Clarins logo to the point of sale booth that we constructed back in March. Again, just covering the construction of the booth. All we basically did was have like a basic circle which was then deformed and extruded, and then had a chamfer applied with an edit poly, and then was mapped vertically with a single map channel, just so that we could apply a faked internally illuminated material, which was this gradient going from a darker grey to a mid grey and then back to a darker grey at the top, which was then mixed with a fall off, so that on the perpendicular it was looked like it was more illuminated. Had a slight reflection on it, about 50%, which to make it look like it had been a polished surface. The other couple of objects in the scene that were relevant, obviously the plinth at the base, which was unwrapped and textured with this cedar wood material, and then the other material is just a basic, just select hold of it, yeah, just a basic loft, which was like an L shape, which was just lofted around the edge to create like a bit of a rim effect. We had a basic metal material applied to that. So if I just quickly render that out, we're using the skylight light with low shadow quality, and also an additional light in there as well. So we've got this kind of self-illumination effect on the perpendicular and also in the middle. So what we want to do then is just drop in the Clarins logo, but we want to use a different type of material for it. We want to use like a gold leaf metal effect on the front, but not on the rear. So therefore what we need to do is we need to apply a decal material. Now there's two ways we could do this. One is by having two sets of colours within the diffuse slot, two sets of colours within the specular level and in the glossiness, to basically say, okay, this is one strength, this is another strength, basically by using grayscale material, grayscale map colours, sorry, to determine the actual values. Say for example a value of 100, the map will be white, and value of 0, the map will be black, and so on. But having that amount of maps in there is going to be quite painstaking. So what an easier solution is to use a blend material, which we can keep the old material as a sub-material, and then we can use another material to design the colour and tint of our gold leaf. So we'll just quickly do that now. So we don't want the diffuse colour to be very bright at all, so actually just take that all the way down to black. We want the specular level to be roughly about the same size as this metal here, so it's going to be about a 1, 2, 3 with a glossiness of 7. So let's quickly dial that in. Oh, wrong button. Okay, and we want to have a reflection in there, which we can basically drop in with a simple ray trace map. So we get this kind of like, chromic effect. However, we want the kind of like a gold leaf effect. We want it to be tinted slightly. So what we can do is we can basically select this ray trace map here and add an RGB tint. Keep the old map as a submap, and then what we can do, if I just drag this material out, we can see the end result, and then all I need to do is just colorize the material, sorry, the RGB tint, so it comes out as more of a gold color than before. So let's just drop some of these guys down. So we get more of a gold colour in the reflection. So the reflection is more tinted than before. So that's roughly about right. We can obviously drop the reflection down a touch. So let's drop that down to about, and drop it to about 80%. So all we need to do now is mix that material with this material across the front with the Clarence text. Now how do we do that? Firstly, we can, if you notice here in the blend, we've got our white self-illuminated material, and in the second slot we've got this, let's just call that gold leaf material, which obviously is an instance into there. So we need to blend these two together, and to do that we can use a map, be it you can use a cellular, a checker, any specific one of these, any particular one, doesn't really matter, but we obviously want to keep it confined within the Clarence logo, so therefore it's going to be a custom map, so therefore we need to use a bitmap map. So selecting the Clarence mask, which is just literally a black on white map, which will tell one material to be one color, to be one material. Sorry, it will tell, this map will tell the entire material, the blend material, to say in the black areas be the top, and in the white areas be the bottom one. We can obviously blend the two together like we had before with the mix map by blending them using the mix amount, but obviously that doesn't look very nice at all, so we can use this particular one. Now if I render this out now, we will see an immediate problem, that the Clarence logo isn't applied in the right place, nor is it at the right scale, so therefore we need to position it accordingly to make sure that it's in pride of place. So obviously we need to get it at the front of the booth. Now we've got one map channel already being used to actually determine the fall off, the gradient ramp in the self-illumination effect in this particular booth here. So what we need to do is obviously need to include another one which is applied virtually face on with the correct dimensions for this particular mask. So to do that we can go in and tell this particular decal texture here to use a specific map channel of 2, and then to relate to that let's put in an additional UVW map and then orient it correctly so it's facing the right way. Now if you render this out now, it's still saying that the UVW2 isn't applied, so we need to cancel that and then set the UVW map channel to 2, so they both the map in the material editor map channel corresponds with the UVW map modifier in the plinth. Now that's working to some degree, however the texture itself is stretched beyond belief. It's stretched all the way to the extremities. So what we need to do now is we need to scale this texture so it fits the actual correct proportions. So to do that, same principle as before in the previous tutorial, we need to basically fit the bitmap to its correct proportions. So fit the UVW map gizmo, which basically dictates how the map is positioned and distributed. It needs to be scaled, have its correct dimensions in proportion and in relation to the actual bitmap. So we just click on the bitmap fit button, click on the Clarence mask, and hey presto, that is the correct size. It may not be the correct position or large enough, however we can sort that out momentarily. So let's just give that another quick render. And the positioning is roughly about right. Obviously as we're planar mapping it, we are getting, you may get some slight distortion if you basically make it too big. It may seem like the C is a little bit too large, or the S is a little bit too large. It's kind of stretched around the sides a little bit, but for the most part, this is pretty much forgivable. If you want to get around that, if you want to have clarins wrapped around all the way, then we're basically going to have to use a different type of mapping, for example cylindrical, which is more forgiving this way, or we will need to map it this way and then unwrap and then relax the edges so that the mapping is even. However, in this particular example, we just need to just slap it on and everything seems to be fine. One thing that is apparent, however, if we just go back to our render frame window, show us rendering, is that we've got some tiling going on. We basically just want the logo to be situated here, not on the sides. So to get around that, what we need to do is we need to turn off tiling for these for the UMV mapping coordinates. So let's give that another go. And now the side texture is obviously removed because the mapping is just confined within our UVW mapping gizmo. Now the reason it's working this way and not continuing out is basically because this entire background is set to black, and black being this top material. However, if this background, let's just go back to that, if this background was set to a different color, be it red or blue, its luminance value would obviously clip off at the edge of this UVW map. So therefore we'd basically have like a semi gold leaf, semi white soft illuminated plinth up to the edge here, and then it would go to the white soft illuminated plinth material on this particular side. So we obviously need to have this particular white on black mask effect to distribute the materials correctly. Next thing we need to sort out, if we just scoot round the back, is that the clarins logo is applied at the rear, because the map has obviously been cast all the way through. Now this might be applicable, it might be forgivable, you might be able to get away with this depending on what the particular view is of the booth. Say for example you've got a large cabinet situated behind it and you're never going to actually see this from behind. If you're not going to see it from behind, don't worry about it. If there's not going to be any reflection in the cabinet, so you won't be able to see the clarins logo reflected in the cabinet, again, don't fret about it. You can basically get away with it. However, if you are going to basically do a walk around, which we will do in a second, what we basically need to do obviously is to remove this rear texture. Now obviously to do this we basically need to go on and now to do this we basically need to go through and there's a couple of ways we can do it. One is by actually physically masking off. If we go into the top viewport, we can simply create a gradient that clips off here, so we've only got one area which is actually controlling the mask. So to do that we can use the existing UVW map coordinates for the UVW map 1 channel. We can basically stick like a map going across this way, so it clips off there, so we've got literally white here, black that side, and then use that to mask within this clarins mask. However, recently Max has basically been introduced with an option saying show map on back. So what that basically means is that if you're projecting it in one certain direction, for example if you're projecting it one way, i.e. with its local axis coordinates facing one specific direction, you can basically apply it that particular way and not have it on the opposite side simply by unchecking this checkbox here. So if I uncheck that and render out this way, you'll see that the clarins logo is present on the front, However, if I spin around, it's not present on the back, which is exactly what we need. Now obviously if you do enable this and the texture on the front suddenly disappears, as a quick example, we'll just scoot around there. If for some bizarre reason you suddenly get this, then obviously your map's facing the wrong way. So all you really need to do is just simply cancel the render, grab hold of this, and literally spin the map gizmo around 180 degrees, re-render, and hey presto, there it is. So that's basically a quick and dirty and quick and easy way to apply any specific mixture of materials. Now the good thing about this particular example is that we have two main types of material, be it one's kind of like a very high specular and very high, glossiness material, so therefore it's very, very, polished perspex, very plasticky effect, and the other one has got a very high specular value but a low glossiness, simulating a metallic effect. Being able to mix these natively within one single material is going to be very, very difficult, so therefore I would very, very highly recommend you use a blend material to be able to do this. However, if you do have just one type of material to use, for example, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a quick copy of this particular material here. So let's call that internal lit gradient clarins. What I can do is set up, if you're using, for example, this Clarins logo here, we want it to be exactly the same type of specular value and everything applied to this one object here. So we're not having this kind of gold leaf effect, not changing specularity or anything. We just want it to be, say for example, the Clarins pink. So what we can do is drop in a mix map, and let's grab hold of that diffuse color, and I'm going to paste it in one slot, and then in the second color I'm just going to roughly off the top of my head just grab in a pink value. Obviously you'd point sample the actual Clarins logo itself or determine the Pantone colors and dial those in, and then what we can use, actually we may as well simply copy this particular map that we've already got in here and instance it in there. Again, if it's not broke, don't fix it, we've already got it there, so we may as well use it. So then this material can then be assigned to this plinth. Let's render this out, and we should get this pink effect. We can just about make it out. I'm just going to tone this down a touch, and then drop the intense, so make it a little bit more intense, increase the saturation a little bit, and drop down the value so it's a little bit more apparent. So you can just about make it out. Let's just exaggerate it a little bit by dropping this map that we have, this Clarins mask. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to drop that into the bump map slot, so it looks like, there you go, so you can see that it's actually been standing out. So obviously we've got a white on black texture, so therefore the white's making the texture stand out. So we can either, if we negative this to flip it around, the problem is that as it's instanced, we're going to get a change in material on our other material. So all we basically need to do to fix it is just go to a negative bump value. So if I double click on this, we can see how this bump map works. Okay, so rendering it out now, we can see exactly where this Clarins logo is inset. We seem to have lost I think I cut and pasted it by accident, so I'm going to copy and instance it. Accidentally cut and paste by accident. There we go. So we can see that there are two ways to skin a cat, so to speak. We can literally use one texture map on top of another, or one texture map to drive two sets of materials. So just as an example of both parts in our final render, what we can do is I'm going to copy and instance these booths, and then go back to perspective. So I've got the two types of booth here now. We're going to have one with one type and one with another. So let's render that out. So we've got two types of point of sale, one with the totally plastic effect and one with the gold leaf effect. Okay, for a showpiece for an animation, what we can do is we don't really want to do like a walkthrough effect of this type of it's just basically single products. So what we can do is we can just literally do like a spin around, basically like this type of effect, but obviously having the camera locked into the center between them, so we can basically fly up, around, and then back down again. So it is a uniform rotation, so we're not speeding up, slowing down, so it's one continuously long sequence that can basically loop. So you can literally have it on a point of sale display screen or a touch sensitive screen that you can just literally put in pride of place in like a booth or display cabinet that will literally continuously play. So to do that, what we can do is just literally we can either create a camera, or because we've got quite a nice viewport set up here, what I'm going to do is because I'm in perspective, I can press Control, hold down C, and that will literally create a camera from the current view, and obviously changes it to this view as well. So if I go to the top viewport, you can see here that we've got this camera set up. So what I want to do is I want to point, let's just get the right thing, point this roughly in the center of our two booths. I'm going to switch back to the camera view, and obviously we're looking up now, so I want to obviously drop the nose down on that and center that off. Now because our end result is going to be, let's put it as 640/480, we want to see exactly what we're going to see in the rendered frame. So if we right click on the camera text up here, we can show save frame. So that basically shows us exactly what we're going to see at render time. And what we want to do is we want to have a total 360-degree rotation all the way around these booths. Now, there's two ways to do this really. One is that we could keyframe, if we go to the top view, we could keyframe a point here at about frame 25, one here at about 50, one here at 75, and back exactly in the same place at about frame 100. But an easy way to do it is just literally to create a circle roughly about the right distance, and we can use this circle for the camera to follow around over the 100 frame duration. Now what we don't want to do is directly use the camera on this particular path. Reason being is we might want to move the camera up and down. If we assign the camera directly to the path, we won't be able to do that. So because it completely overrides all translation, rotation effects. So what we want to do is we want to use a dummy, and we can link a dummy, use a dummy to actually pass around the circle, and we can then link the camera to the dummy, so we still have the actual free motion on the camera while we're still travelling around the plinths on the circle. So to do that, we've got the dummy selected. Let's just label that dummy camera. Go to the the motion tab, expand the assign controller, and then click on the position controller, and then click on the assign controller button, which is this guy here. So we obviously need to use a path constraint. So basically we're obviously using a spline as a path. Click on OK, then we can add the path to it. Now that obviously jumps through to the first vertex point. So if I actually select this circle and then go to edit spline, go into vertex, that is the first vertex on the entire spline. So that is where the dummy is actually being situated. Now we obviously, if we want to start from this position over here, because by linking this camera to this dummy, as this dummy rotates around, this camera is just going to go around like that, not around like that. So therefore we either need to offset the animation. To do this, we can start the percentage along path at around about that particular point there, or we can literally take the entire circle and rotate it so that this first vertex is situated around here. Offsetting the animation is normally about the easiest solution, so we'll live with this particular method. Okay, next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we are at the right height. So I'm going to bring this up here, so it's roughly about the same height, and then all we need to do is link the camera to the dummy, and then when we rotate round, we have a linear rotation that goes around the plinth. So if I switch to the camera view, we've got this nice smooth rotation that circles the plinths at an even distance. Now one thing we will notice is that the camera target appears to be scooting out the way, so what we might need to do is at certain points along the sequence we might need to reframe. For example, here it looks like we're not getting everything in frame, so what we might want to do is auto key this guy down slightly for this particular point, then back up to here. We might want to reframe again. This particular point we might want to reframe. Let's actually put that up to frame 100, so that exactly the same point at frame 100 we need the camera and target pointing in exactly the same location at frame 100 as we do at frame 0. So I'm basically holding down shift and dragging this keyframe at frame 100 back to frame 0 so that it is in the same point. So if we play through now, we're reframing. Let's just make sure that's right. And then I'm going to reshift that key across there as well. It seems to be scooting across too much to that side, so I'm just going to get rid of that keyframe there. I think that'll do. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend the length of this plane. I'm just going to take that out so it looks like it's an infinity plane. Oh, it's clipping top of frame there, so I'm just going to expand that a little bit further. Wrong one. There we go. Just checking top of frames just to make sure everything is in shot. Okay, so now what we have is a nice sequence. I mean, we could do this with anything, be it a bottle of perfume or a display cabinet, or if you really want to, like you can actually do a walkthrough this way by animating, just having a line as opposed to a circle. You can basically have it going from the camera going from point A to point B via point Z around here, so you could have a line going like this, and the camera would obviously follow along the path, get to the end, and then the beginning of the next beginning of the sequence again, it would literally jump back to the beginning and then play through. Because this is obviously a circle and is an enclosed shape, it basically follows all the way around. Same principle with this. If this line went all the way over to here and then came all the way back round there, you'd basically have one long looping animation. Same principle with this. So if what I'm going to do is I'm going to select again all the geometry, and I'm going to enable image motion blur as we did in the bedroom scene, and I'm going to render off a quick sample. Now you'll notice that the render time on this is okay, it's not brilliant. What you obviously could do is use the external sky dome solution that we did in a previous tutorial to simulate this kind of daylight effect. In essence here we're just using skylight just a quick and dirty solution. It does create quite a nice effect. Actually, it creates quite a nice dithered effect here. But for the most part, it does create a long render time. However, if you do have access to a render farm, brilliant. Or if you've got like overnight to render the thing, even better. So you should be able to get away with any issues. So that's producing quite a nice render. Once it's finished, I'm just going to make sure that this key light is actually situated on our booths. Bit of motion blur in there as well, which is quite good. Again, if you're doing this as a print render, then obviously you'll need to turn motion blur off or position a static camera, or even what you could do is just literally take this camera view. If this is your preferred render point, you can literally just hit P for perspective if you've got no other perspective viewports in any of your other viewports here, and you can literally move it around. Because you're in perspective view is not animated, there's no other objects in here which are animated apart from the camera, so if you rendered it out you wouldn't get any motion blur, safe to say. So I'm just going to check from the, let's just make sure that we've got an actual Omni light in here and not a direct light. So what I'm going to do, just to save render times, and I'm going to change this Omni light to a direct light, make it targeted, and I'm going to focus the target of these lights. Just going to bring this over there like so. So we've got one object that's casting a shadow onto another one, and drop the target onto the ground. I'm going to use the local axis, which is over here actually, to extend the distance, and I'm going to view the light. It's still called Omni, so I'm going to call it direct 1, and I'm going to increase hotspot beam and put on overshoot as well. So it will take less time to render now, and increase the shadow quality, drop the bias, go to my camera view, and let's render this and have a look, see what it looks like. I don't think we'll actually have any, no, we won't have any shading effect here now, which is unfortunate because we seem to have lost that now, but we will get a faster render because there won't be so many shadows that are being calculated, and we'll get some nicer linear shadows. So all that's left to do really is to, I think we'll actually reposition this key light. I think we'll actually get it so the shadows are pointing more this direction than against one another. So I'm just going to cancel that and then reposition this guy over here. So I think the last thing to do now, like I say, is to render out the entire animation. Now, because this is a looping sequence, frame 0 and frame 99 are exactly the same place. Sorry, frame 0 and frame 100, sorry, are in exactly the same place. So therefore, if we render this out, then we would have two duplicate frames when it comes to playback. So what we need to do is we need to render off from frame 1 to frame 100, which is in total 100 frames. Frame 0 to frame 100 is obviously 101 frames. So for a 100 frame sequence, we need to render out from frame 1, which will obviously start with motion blur. If we start at frame 0, the camera is not moving yet, unless we actually start the entire rotation sequence from frame -1. So we want to start rendering out this animation sequence from frame 1 all the way through to frame 100, so we have motion blur from the start, and that we don't have a duplicate frame at frame 0 and frame 100, because if we actually come back to playback, then you might get a little stagger. It may be a slight little blip where we have the double frames. So on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and render this sequence, pause the video again, and I'll see you on the other side once it's finished rendering. And here we have the finished rendered animation, so let's just have a quick look at that, see how that turned out. So let's have a quick view. So that's turned out not too bad. Obviously the key light's remaining in the same place, so we don't have any animated shadows, which is good. So we're just moving the camera around the point of sale booths. Now obviously this animation is a little bit on the fast side. It's actually playing at 30 frames a second instead of 25, and also it's only 100 frames, so it's only about 3 seconds in length. So therefore obviously if you do this for a final animation, then obviously you'd want to do it for longer so that the audience can actually view the booth in more detail. So therefore you'd obviously want to do several different animations, maybe fly pasts, pan ups, that kind of thing, and then crossfade them using the tools that we used to put together your final animation that we constructed at the end of the training back in March. Right, so that's pretty much the end of that particular lesson. Again, if you want to increase the length of the animation, all you basically need to do is to extend, right click on this, extend the amount of frame time. So let's take that up to 200, click on OK, go to the top viewport. We need to select this dummy and then reposition its end keyframe. Obviously it's finishing there, so we need to reposition that to frame 200, so therefore it goes all the way around in 200 frames now, as opposed to 100, which obviously gives us a nicer, more leisurely pace and gives us something better to look at.